And so today's training, we're going to get into the 7 steps on how to have courageous conversations. Hey there, my name is Emma BF, and I am a leadership coach for women in tech. I have supported and coached hundreds of women who work within tech companies to communicate with confidence, speak effectively, and tap into their own authentic leadership style. I've spoken on international stages around the world and delivered corporate workshops on topics like executive presence, how to lead your own way. It is my mission to inspire and empower women to step into leadership and own their power. Because y'all, I know what it feels like to avoid having hard conversations because you don't know exactly what to say or how to say it. And you may be worried that maybe you'll go into the conversation and the person will take what you say the wrong way, or you won't say the right thing and you'll do more damage. So you avoid the conversation. Does that feel like you or something you can relate to? If so, today's training is going to be super valuable for you, the 7 steps to have courageous conversations. All right, so let's get into it. The 7 easy steps. The first step that you're going to do is decide if you need to have the conversation. Because the truth is, it's likely that every conversation doesn't need to actually happen. Even though I know it can feel like it, not every conversation needs to be had. So here's a quick question to ask yourself to decide if you're ready to have this hard conversation or this courageous conversation. Ask yourself, what is the goal for this conversation? So if it's to clear the air, if it's to build trust, if it's to share lessons from a mistake, request support, or align your goals or getting everybody on the same page, then I would say you are ready to have the conversation. Now, if your goal of the conversation is more to prove that you're right, if your goal is to blame the person, to vent about how you've been wronged, or maybe a little CYA, which is cover yo booty, but another word for that, then I would say that you are not ready to have this conversation yet. Because it's really important to know the intention that you're coming from for this conversation. So if you're in one of those, yes, I'm ready to clear the air, build trust, something that is more forward thinking, it's proactive, or it's addressing something that you don't want to happen again, you are ready to have the conversation. But if you're ready to just prove that you're right or blame somebody or shame somebody or go into that energy, I'm going to tell you that you're not ready to have this conversation yet. Another question you can ask yourself to know if you're ready to have this conversation is ask, will this conversation serve my future goals? Right? Ask yourself, will a strong relationship with this person serve me? You can also ask, does this conversation need to happen right now? Sometimes we think a conversation needs to happen right now, but in fact, it doesn't need to right now. So those are some questions that you can ask to get into the mindset and decide if you need to have the conversation. The second step is to name your fear. And this step is super important because often why we're avoiding having conversations is because we have a really big fear going into the conversation. And so you first got to name the fear to tame the fear. So ask yourself, what is my biggest fear with this conversation? Am I afraid that nothing will change? Am I afraid that I'll sound stupid? Am I afraid I won't get the outcome that I want, that I'll be seen as overly emotional or aggressive, or maybe even you're afraid that you'll get fired? You got to name your biggest fear so that your brain understands why it's holding back. And in my experience coaching and working with women leaders, there are 5 fears that I often see come up the most. So I want you to ask yourself, is this my fear? The first is fear of judgment. The second is fear of being wrong. The third is the fear of not being liked. The fourth is the fear of not belonging. And 5 is the fear of the unknown. So I'm curious, which one of those fears resonates for you? Are you afraid of being judged, being wrong, not being liked, fear of not belonging, or fear of the unknown? Because by you identifying what the biggest fear is, you're able to let your brain know, okay, this is my biggest fear. I can help you almost like take a pause out of that downward spiral of worst case scenario thinking. I mean, I myself have been there, right? Where it's just worst case scenario spiraling. But if you can cut through that and really name the fear, you can create some space. And with that space, we can now go into step 3, which is I now want you to flip it and identify the best case scenario. Honestly, sometimes we don't even ask what the best case scenario is. We get so stuck in the fear, we get so stuck in the worst case scenario that we go into conversations expecting the worst case scenario to happen. But it's super important before you go into a conversation to take just a few moments and process this question. If everything goes right, what would happen? If everything goes right, what would happen? What would it mean to you if everything went right? It went great. Maybe a best case scenario here is that you and the person actually agree on something, right? Maybe the best case scenario is that you get the promotion if you're going into a negotiation or something. Maybe the best case scenario is that your team doesn't make the same mistake moving forward. Best case scenario could be that your relationship with this person gets stronger. Or maybe the best case scenario is you'll land the deal if you're going into a hard conversation on a deal or sales cycle or anything like that. And so I really want to invite you to identify that best case scenario so that your brain can also see it as another possibility for the outcome of this conversation. Does that make sense? Like, our brains are so trained to expect the worst case outcome because we're fearful, we're scared. Like, maybe we've had traumatic experiences in the past with these hard conversations, so we just expect it's going to happen that way. But here we can identify the best case scenario so that our brain can understand that, hey, there's another way that this could go. And you're almost starting to like train your brain or strengthen your muscle to expect the best case scenario. All right. So those are your first 3 steps. I want you to decide if you can have a conversation, if you even need to have a conversation. You're going to name your fear, and then you're going to identify the best case scenario. I'm curious if you're already getting value from this video. If so, drop a comment below so that I can see what value are you getting, what aha moments are opening up for you simply by going through those first 3 steps. And we got 4 more to go, so let's go together, y'all. Step number 4 is getting clear on what to share. Because if we're not clear on what to share in the conversation, it's very possible that we'll go in there and just go, like word vomit, like where there's no clear intention of what you want to share, then you don't really have a plan for this conversation. And you're not going to come in and be seen as a leader, and you're not going to come in and have respect, and you're not going to be, guiding the conversation. So it's super important to get clear on what you want to say. And there's a simple framework I'm going to teach you right now on getting clear what to share, okay? So the first one is these are prompts that can support you so that you can write it down on a piece of paper, type it out ahead of time, or just make notes in your head, all right? So I want you to, let's say you're going in to have a hard conversation. Maybe you're trying to give feedback to somebody who talked over you in a meeting. The first thing you're going to do is describe what happened. Like with as little emotion as possible, I invite you to describe the experience that happened and simply stick with the facts. So for example, this conversation could say, hey, so-and-so, when we were in that meeting and I was presenting, repeatedly you jumped in and interrupted me while I was mid-sentence. Very, very no emotions, just the facts, what I noticed, here's what happened, and here's the experience. I noticed that while I was speaking, you interrupted me multiple times. The second piece then is I want you to be honest with them about what you believed about yourself or that person in the moment. So, for example, if I was interrupted by a person multiple times, I would believe that what I had to say didn't have a lot of value. Or what I believed probably about that other person is that they didn't respect me. And so I would be honest and actually bring that to the conversation. Here's what happened. Here's the experience. And what I believed about myself in the moment was that what I had to say didn't matter. And what I believed about you in the moment was that you didn't respect me. Then we move into the third piece, which is you're going to describe the effect or the result that it caused. So, for example, the effect or result of me believing that what I have doesn't have value, the effect is that I shrunk back. I didn't interrupt you. I didn't ask you to hold questions until the end. And the result that caused is that I was not positioned as the leader. I was not positioned as the expert or as the authority. And you just want to be super honest with people. This is not going into shaming or blaming or making them feel wrong or about them getting defensive. Really, what you want to be doing is just bringing the information to them and not sugarcoating it. Okay? The final part on getting clear on what to share is that you can make a suggestion on how to adjust the behavior moving forward. You don't have to have this as a part of it, but if there's a very clear ask, you can make an ask of somebody, right? So let's bring it back to this scenario. So if somebody's continuing to speak over me, I would, in this conversation, say, and I'm going to ask you moving forward to hold your thoughts or questions until the end where there's Q&A, right? So what we're doing is we're getting clear on what to share. This is even before we step into the meeting, y'all, even before we step into the courageous conversation. I invite you to actually write these things down so that you can get clear on what to share. And if needed, you can write it out. You can practice it either with yourself or somebody else so that you can get feedback on, hey, is what I'm saying very important? Bring it back to the intention for the conversation. Am I saying this in a way that it sounds like I'm blaming the person or shaming the person or making them wrong or making me the victim, right? Or am I coming to this conversation to just honestly give them my experience of what happened? So that's step 4. Get clear on what to share. This is super, super important. All right, step 5, commit to collaboration and openness. Because the biggest mistake that I see for women in particular going into courageous conversations is that it feels like they gotta get ready for battle before going into these calls. Have you ever had that experience where you're like, I'm about to go into this conversation and I'm super afraid of how this person's gonna react to me, so I'm gonna just put up all my armor. Brene Brown, who is a leadership expert and author, talks a lot about how we armor up, which means we put up walls, we put up defensiveness, we put up guilt, blame, and shame so that we're protecting ourselves from getting hurt. But this is a huge consequence in the workplace, because if I come into a conversation with my armor up, then the people whoever I'm interacting with, they're going to feel that energy. They're going to know that I'm about to come for them. I'm coming in hot. I'm going to take you down, right? So what it takes is a commitment on your end to collaboration, to openness. It is up to you and it is up to me to make that commitment to collaborate and to be open. And the most important piece of this is that you have to release attachment to your version of the story being the right one. You're going to have to let go of the full belief that you are right in this scenario. And I get it. This can be super hard. This can be super hard, especially if you feel like you have been wronged. But again, if the intention of the call is to collaborate, is to clear the air, is to build trust, then you got to make that commitment to yourself. And you got to make a commitment to bring that energy into the conversation. Because if your goal, on the other hand, is to be right, to blame this person, to tell them how they wronged you, then there isn't really an opening to have a conversation with somebody. Because they're going to feel that you're telling them that they did something wrong. So people can read your energy in an instant, and especially virtually. Pretty much all the women I work with work in tech. They work in tech companies, and we're all virtual. We're all remote. And they think that your energy can't be read. But it can be read in an instant. You set the tone when you have these hard conversations. People will notice it in your body language. They'll notice it in your facial expressions. They'll notice it in your tone of voice. And they'll notice it in your rhythm of speech. Right? So I'm not telling you how to talk or act or be. Let me be clear about that. But I can guarantee that the other person is picking up on your energy and using that as a guide for how they will interact. So you got to make a commitment. Make a commitment to collaboration, make a commitment to openness, and bring it back to that step 1. Decide if you're ready to have a conversation. Because if you're not in that space to be able to commit to collaboration and openness, I might suggest that you don't yet have this conversation, or you ask for a mediator, or you ask for a third party to come in there to support you in that process. All right? We're getting towards the end, y'all. We're getting towards the end. But do you notice how literally steps 1 through 5 are all happening before you step into the conversation? This is so key. This is so key. It's like 70% of the work to have these hard conversations or these courageous conversations happen before you even step into the conversation itself. And so now you're ready to have a conversation. You've done a lot of inner work. You've gotten clear. You've named all the things. And now we're in step 6, which is to get grounded right before the call. And this is super important, again, from that energetic perspective. Because in order for you to come in with the energy, with setting the tone that you want to create in that conversation, you got to get grounded in your body. So I'm going to introduce to you a very simple breathwork tool. It's called the box breath. It's used all over. It's a very popular and powerful breathwork tool for you to get grounded. And what we're going to do is we're going to inhale for 4 breaths. We're going to hold for 4 breaths. We're going to exhale for 4 breaths. And we're going to hold for 4 breaths. So I'll do it once with you so that you can do it and you can try it on yourself. So what we'll do is we'll breathe out all the air. And we'll inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. And do that 3 times. A little box breath, 3 box breaths can help you take 30 seconds to become calm and grounded. You can take another 30 seconds to visualize your best case scenario. Visualization is used by a tool by some of the most successful people in the world. And this works, y'all. This works. It's for you to actually close your eyes and visualize that best case scenario. Simply 30 seconds will put you into that energy. Okay? So once you're grounded and you're ready to have the conversation, you're going to go into that conversation and share what you did in step 4, which is get clear on what to share. You can thank them for coming to this conversation. You can then share, here's what I experienced, here's what I believed about you and what I believed about me, and then this is the effect or result that caused, And then lastly, if you have, feedback, if you have a suggestion on how to move forward, you can go there. Because step 7 is to be open to feedback. Because once you share your experience, you then get to let this be a two-way conversation. So once you share your experience, you can ask one of these questions. What was your experience? Did you experience the same thing that I did? Or you can ask, what did you notice in that moment? Was this something that I noticed, or did you notice it as well? The third question you can ask is, what do you think about this? I've shared my experience and I want to hear yours as well. Lastly, you can ask, do you have any other suggestions on how we can move forward? All right. So that's being open to feedback. That's bringing that openness, that collaboration to the conversation. Is once you share your experience, you ask for their feedback. And you got to be open. You got to be open to your experience of the situation not being the right one. All right. The last thing here is that if strong emotions come up, because y'all, I get it. Like, we can have this beautiful plan on how we're about to have this courageous conversation. And then we walk in there and like emotions come up, or like something goes completely off the plan. I want to just invite you to have 4 tools at your disposal for if strong emotions come up, how you can address them. So the first one is to take a deep breath in the moment. Especially on video conferencing, you can go ahead and just like mute yourself for a moment, or even when you're off camera. Look, I'm just going to inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. Just to get grounded, especially if hard emotions come up, okay? Number 2 is you can squeeze a stress ball. I keep this by my side at all times. A squeeze ball or a fidgeter is super helpful. If you feel strong emotions come up, you can do it below here and nobody can see it. Your third tool is that you can actually interrupt the conversation and say, hey, I think we're getting off track here and I'd like to bring us back to this specific point. Because if somebody goes all over the place, like, you can ask them to really bring it back and say, I think we're getting off track here and I'd like to bring us back to this specific point. All right. The fourth one is to ask to pause the conversation and schedule another time to talk so that things can cool down. Sometimes it takes more than one conversation, y'all, and that really does take courage. So always know that you can pause the conversation. You can ask to come back to it. You do not have to stay in a toxic conversation or a high emotion conversation. You can always ask to pause and revisit it. All right? And that's it. Those are your 7 steps. So I'm going to review them, and I'd love to hear in the comments below what has been the most valuable to you. So step 1 is decide if you need to have the conversation. Step 2 is to name your fear. Step 3 is to identify the best case scenario. Step 4 is to get clear on what to share. Step 5 is commit to collaboration and openness. Step 6 is get grounded right before. And step 7 is be open to feedback. I hope this framework on how to have hard and courageous conversations has been beneficial to you. If you like this video, please give it a like, a comment, a share, and subscribe. And there are additional resources below so that you can learn more. Bye, y'all.